My sister-in-law Stephanie blocked me from attending the exclusive family winery tour at Montrose Vineyards, the same property I had secretly acquired through my investment portfolio 6 months earlier. She laughed when I asked if there was space for one more guest, saying, "This is for real family members only, not charity cases." I simply smiled and said, "Enjoy discovering the new ownership structure." The next morning brought 17 frantic voicemails and a text that read, "We need to talk immediately." But I was too busy reviewing the quarterly reports from my vineyard management team to respond. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony of being dismissed as a charity case by someone standing on property I owned was not lost on me as I sat in my home office that evening, reviewing financial statements that would have shocked Stephanie into speechlessness. The woman who had just excluded me from a family gathering was completely unaware that every bottle of wine they would taste during their exclusive tour generated revenue that flowed directly into investment accounts bearing my name. But understanding how I reached this position of hidden financial power requires going back 18 months to the moment when everything changed. When a chance conversation at a corporate networking event revealed an opportunity that would transform both my portfolio and my relationship with a family that had spent years treating me as an outsider despite my marriage to their beloved son. I had been attending the Pacific Northwest Investment Summit in downtown Portland, representing my firm's interests in sustainable agriculture opportunities. As senior portfolio manager for Harrison Capital Group, I specialized in identifying undervalued assets in traditional industries that smart capital could modernize and scale profitably. My track record spoke for itself. Over the previous 5 years, I had generated returns averaging 28% annually by recognizing value where others saw only declining sectors. The conversation that changed everything occurred during the summit's closing reception, when I found myself standing beside Elena Rodriguez, a respected vineyard broker who had spent 2 decades facilitating transactions in Oregon's wine country. We had been introduced earlier that day during a panel discussion about agricultural investment opportunities, and she had mentioned her expertise in distressed vineyard acquisitions. "Victoria," she said as we watched the sunset paint the Cascade Mountains in shades of gold through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows, "I have been thinking about our earlier conversation regarding premium vineyard opportunities. There is a property coming to market soon that might interest sophisticated investors who understand long-term value creation." Her tone suggested this was not casual conversation but a carefully considered business proposition. Elena Rodriguez did not waste time with small talk when substantial money was involved, and her reputation for identifying exceptional opportunities had made her one of the most sought-after advisors in the industry. "Tell me more," I replied, setting down my wine glass to give her my full attention. "Montrose Vineyards," she said quietly, naming a property I knew well from family gatherings over the years. 47 acres of prime Willamette Valley terroir, established vines dating back 30 years, state-of-the-art production facilities, and a brand reputation that commands premium pricing throughout the Pacific Northwest. The mention of Montrose Vineyards sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the evening breeze drifting through the reception hall's open doors. This was not just any investment opportunity. This was the vineyard where my husband Michael's family held their annual gatherings, where Stephanie had spent countless hours positioning herself as the unofficial family matriarch, where I had been systematically excluded from important conversations about family traditions and future plans. "What makes you think Montrose might be available?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral despite the personal implications of what Elena was suggesting. Her expression grew serious as she explained the financial pressures that were forcing the current owners to consider selling assets they had never intended to part with. The Montrose family has been struggling with estate tax obligations following the patriarch's death 2 years ago. Combined with several poor growing seasons and increased competition from larger wineries, they are facing liquidity challenges that threaten their ability to maintain operations. This information was entirely new to me. Michael had never mentioned financial difficulties affecting the vineyard where his family celebrated holidays and special occasions. Either he was unaware of the situation or had chosen not to share information that might affect my professional judgment as an investment manager. The family is hoping to find a buyer who will maintain the vineyard's character and continue employing the local staff who have worked the land for decades. Elena continued. They want this to feel like stewardship rather than acquisition, which is why they have not listed the property publicly. Her words revealed an opportunity that aligned perfectly with both my investment criteria and my personal understanding of what made Montrose Vineyards special. As someone who had attended family events there for nearly 8 years, I understood the property's unique appeal and the passionate commitment of the staff who had created its reputation for excellence. What kind of investment are we discussing? I asked, though I was already mentally calculating how such an acquisition might fit within my existing portfolio allocation strategies. Elena named a figure that represented a substantial but manageable investment for someone with my resources and borrowing capacity. More importantly, she outlined the revenue streams that would support strong returns while preserving the vineyard's operational character. Premium wine sales, private event hosting, and agritourism opportunities could generate cash flows that would service acquisition financing while building long-term asset value. There is one additional factor you should consider, Elena added with a slight smile that suggested she understood the personal dimensions of this opportunity. The current owners have expressed interest in maintaining family traditions and community connections. A buyer who understands and respects those values would have significant advantages in negotiations. Her comment confirmed that she was aware of my family connections to Montrose Vineyards, though she was too professional to explicitly acknowledge the personal motivations that might influence my investment decision. The opportunity to acquire property where I had been treated as an outsider while supporting the staff and traditions I genuinely valued created compelling alignment between financial strategy and personal satisfaction. That evening, I returned to my apartment in the Pearl District and spent hours analyzing the investment opportunity Elena had presented. The financial projections were attractive, but not exceptional by my usual standards. What made this opportunity unique was the combination of solid returns, personal familiarity with the asset, and the strategic satisfaction of owning property where my opinions had been consistently dismissed. I thought about the countless family gatherings where Stephanie had positioned herself as the expert on wine, entertaining guests with stories about terroir and vintage characteristics, while subtly excluding me from conversations, despite my professional background in evaluating agricultural investments. I remembered the planning meetings for family events where my suggestions were politely ignored while her preferences became family policy. The opportunity to acquire Montrose Vineyards represented more than investment diversification. It was a chance to transform the power dynamics that had characterized my relationship with Michael's family for years. Instead of being the outsider seeking acceptance, I could become the decision-maker whose approval they needed for continued access to spaces they considered their own. But the investment had to make financial sense independent of personal satisfaction. I spent the following week conducting detailed due diligence on Montrose Vineyards, analyzing production records, reviewing financial statements, and evaluating market conditions that would affect future profitability. The numbers supported Elena's optimistic projections, while revealing opportunities for operational improvements that could enhance returns significantly. The vineyard's location in the heart of Oregon's premier wine-growing region provided natural advantages that smart management could leverage more effectively. The existing facilities were well-maintained but underutilized, creating opportunities to expand premium wine production and develop additional revenue streams through enhanced hospitality offerings. More importantly, my analysis revealed that the current owners had been operating conservatively, prioritizing tradition over optimization in ways that limited financial performance. A more strategic approach to production, marketing, and customer experience could generate substantially higher returns, while preserving the quality and character that made Montrose Vineyards special. 2 weeks after Elena's initial approach, I submitted a comprehensive acquisition proposal that addressed both the financial needs of the sellers and their concerns about maintaining the vineyard's legacy. My offer was structured to provide immediate liquidity for estate obligations, while ensuring continued employment for existing staff and preservation of operational traditions that define the Montrose brand. The negotiations proceeded smoothly once the sellers understood that I viewed the acquisition as stewardship rather than exploitation. My professional background in agricultural investments provided credibility, while my personal familiarity with the property demonstrated genuine appreciation for what made Montrose Vineyards unique. 6 weeks later, I became the sole owner of 47 acres of prime Willamette Valley vineyard land, along with production facilities, inventory, and a brand reputation that commanded premium pricing throughout the region. The acquisition was structured through a limited liability company that provided operational flexibility while maintaining privacy about the ownership change. Michael knew about the investment, of course, though I had presented it as a portfolio diversification opportunity rather than a strategic acquisition of family gathering space. His response was supportive but somewhat abstract. He understood that I had made a smart investment but did not fully grasp the implications for future family dynamics. The rest of his family remained completely unaware of the ownership change. The vineyard continued operating under existing management with the same staff providing the same high-quality service that had characterized Montrose for decades. Nothing visible changed except the quarterly financial reports that now flowed to my investment accounts rather than to the previous owners. I spent the following months learning the operational details of vineyard management while maintaining appropriate distance from day-to-day activities. My role was strategic oversight rather than hands-on management, ensuring that the property generated strong returns while preserving the character and traditions that made it valuable. The first test of the new ownership structure came during harvest season, when Michael's family gathered for their traditional celebration of the year's wine production. I attended, as I always had, as Michael's wife rather than as the property owner, observing family dynamics from a perspective that none of them understood. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Stephanie was in her element during the harvest celebration, regaling guests with her extensive knowledge of winemaking processes and leading informal tours of the production facilities. She spoke with proprietary confidence about future plans and quality standards, apparently unaware that such decisions now required approval from the woman she continued to treat as a peripheral family member. The irony was delicious, but required careful management. I could not reveal my ownership role without disrupting family relationships in ways that might not serve my long-term interests. Instead, I observed and learned, understanding how the property functioned as both business asset and family gathering space. What I discovered was that Stephanie had been positioning herself as the unofficial family authority on all matters related to Montrose Vineyards, despite having no legal or financial connection to the property. She had developed opinions about everything from winemaking techniques to event planning, expressing these views with confidence that suggested ownership rather than mere familiarity. Her behavior revealed a pattern of assumed authority that extended far beyond wine-related topics. Stephanie had appointed herself as the gatekeeper for family traditions, the arbiter of who belonged in various social situations, and the spokesperson for family values that she interpreted according to her personal preferences. The harvest celebration provided clear evidence of how she managed family dynamics to maintain her position of informal leadership. Conversations were subtly directed through her preferences, guest lists reflected her social priorities, and even seating arrangements at family dinners reinforced hierarchies that positioned her as central to all important discussions. What she did not understand was that her informal authority now existed entirely at the pleasure of someone she considered insignificant. Every pronouncement about vineyard traditions, every decision about family events, every assumption about her permanent role in family gatherings was now subject to revision by the woman she had spent years dismissing as an outsider. The realization that I possessed this hidden power, while she remained completely unaware of the shift in fundamental dynamics, created a satisfaction that went far beyond financial returns. I owned the property where she played queen, controlled the resources she took for granted, and held the authority she assumed belonged to her by right of family position. But I also understood that revealing this power prematurely could diminish its strategic value. The most effective use of ownership authority might be patient observation followed by strategic revelation at the moment when it would create maximum impact on family dynamics that had needed correction for years. As I drove home from that harvest celebration, watching the sunset paint the vineyard landscape in shades of gold and amber, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed without anyone understanding what had changed. The woman who had been excluded from family decisions now controlled the property where those decisions affected operations worth millions of dollars. The question was not whether to use this power but when and how to reveal it in ways that would reshape family relationships, while advancing both my personal satisfaction and my professional interests in building long-term asset value through strategic ownership of premium agricultural properties. The transformation in Stephanie's behavior began subtly during the months following my acquisition of Montrose Vineyards, though she remained entirely unaware that her increasing assertions of authority were taking place on property I owned. What had previously been enthusiastic participation in family gatherings evolved into something far more presumptuous, as if proximity to the vineyard had imbued her with proprietary rights that existed only in her imagination. The first indication of this shift occurred during Thanksgiving dinner, when the family gathered in the vineyard's private dining room for their traditional celebration. Stephanie had arrived early to oversee table arrangements and meal preparation, positioning herself as the hostess despite the fact that we were guests in a facility operated by professional staff who had been managing such events for decades. "Victoria, you can sit at the far end near the kitchen," she announced when I arrived with Michael, gesturing toward chairs that would position me away from the head table where she had seated herself beside the most prominent family members. "I thought you would be more comfortable there since you always seem a bit overwhelmed by our wine discussions." The casual dismissal stung not because of the seating arrangement itself, but because of the assumption that my professional expertise in agricultural investments somehow made me less qualified to participate in conversations about viticulture. She was positioning me as a peripheral figure at a gathering taking place in facilities I owned, managed by staff whose salaries ultimately derived from my investment returns. Michael appeared uncomfortable with his sister's presumptuous behavior, but chose not to challenge her directly, a pattern that had characterized family dynamics for years. His conflict avoidance had allowed Stephanie to accumulate informal authority through persistent assertion rather than legitimate delegation, creating situations where her preferences became family policy through default rather than genuine consensus. I accepted the assigned seating without comment, understanding that premature confrontation would diminish the strategic value of my hidden ownership position. Instead, I observed how Stephanie managed the evening's dynamics, taking notes on her methods for controlling conversations and influencing family decision-making processes. Her technique was sophisticated and largely unconscious. She would begin conversations by referencing previous discussions that had supposedly established family positions on various topics, creating the impression that consensus already existed, when in fact, she was simply asserting her personal preferences as collective wisdom. When disagreements emerged, she would appeal to tradition or family harmony in ways that positioned opposition as divisive rather than legitimate. Most effectively, she had developed the habit of speaking for absent family members, claiming to represent their views in ways that supported her preferred outcomes. "Uncle Robert always says the vineyard should maintain its traditional character," she would declare when discussing potential changes, though Robert had never explicitly authorized her to represent his opinions in family forums. The Thanksgiving gathering provided multiple examples of this manipulative communication style. When conversation turned to holiday planning for the following year, Stephanie immediately began outlining her vision for expanded celebrations that would position Montrose Vineyards as the permanent center of family traditions. "I have been thinking we should establish a formal family foundation to support the vineyard's long-term preservation," she announced during the main course, speaking with the authority of someone who had consulted extensively with legal and financial experts. "We could create a structure that ensures future generations maintain their connection to this special place." The proposal was presented as family philanthropy, but I recognized it as an attempt to institutionalize her informal authority through legal mechanisms that would give her permanent control over family access to property she did not own. The foundation concept would allow her to position herself as the guardian of family traditions while exercising practical authority over an asset that generated substantial investment returns for my portfolio. Michael's father, David, responded with interest to the foundation proposal, apparently unaware that such an arrangement would require cooperation from the actual property owner rather than simply family consensus. "That sounds like excellent long-term planning, Stephanie. Have you researched the legal requirements for establishing such a foundation? I have been working with attorneys who specialize in family philanthropy, she replied confidently. Though I doubted she had progressed beyond preliminary conversations that assumed family ownership of the property in question. The structure would provide tax advantages while ensuring permanent preservation of our connection to this land. The conversation continued with various family members expressing enthusiasm for a proposal that was fundamentally impossible without my participation as the legal owner of Montrose Vineyards. Stephanie had constructed an elaborate fantasy based on assumptions about property rights that bore no relationship to actual ownership structures, and the family was enthusiastically embracing plans that could not be implemented without my explicit consent. I found myself in the peculiar position of listening to detailed discussions about the future of my own property, while being systematically excluded from decision-making processes that affected my investment. The irony was so pronounced that I struggled to maintain appropriate facial expressions, while Stephanie outlined governance structures for assets she did not control. The evening reached its peak of absurdity when she began assigning family members specific responsibilities for foundation management, essentially creating a fictional organizational chart for overseeing property that belonged entirely to the woman she had relegated to seating near the kitchen. She appointed herself as executive director, naturally, with various relatives serving as board members responsible for different aspects of vineyard stewardship. Victoria, we will probably need your help with administrative tasks once we get the foundation established, she said magnanimously, finally acknowledging my presence at the gathering. I know you have some background in finance, so you could assist with bookkeeping and routine paperwork. The condescending offer to allow me to handle administrative tasks related to my own property represented such a complete inversion of actual authority relationships that I nearly laughed aloud. She was graciously offering to let the legal owner of Montrose Vineyards assist with paperwork for a fictional foundation that would govern property she did not possess any legal right to control. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, perhaps sensing the fundamental problems with his sister's presumptuous planning, but he remained silent rather than challenging assumptions that were becoming increasingly divorced from reality. His passivity enabled Stephanie's fantasy while putting me in the impossible position of either revealing my ownership prematurely or allowing elaborate plans to develop based on complete misunderstanding of legal and financial realities. The following weeks brought additional examples of Stephanie's evolving sense of proprietorship over Montrose Vineyards. She began scheduling personal visits to the property without consulting anyone, treating the vineyard as her private retreat rather than a commercial operation with established protocols for visitor access. The professional staff maintained their courteous service while privately expressing confusion about her assumed authority over scheduling and facility usage. Maria Santos, the vineyard's operations manager, contacted me discreetly to discuss the situation without revealing my ownership role to other family members. Mrs. Harrison, there seems to be some confusion about decision-making authority for facility reservations and event planning, she said during a carefully arranged private conversation. Mrs. Stephanie has been making requests that affect staffing and resource allocation, but we have not received formal authorization for these changes through proper channels. Her diplomatic language could not disguise the fundamental problems Stephanie's behavior was creating for professional staff who understood proper protocols for commercial hospitality operations. She was treating employees as personal servants rather than professionals managing a sophisticated business operation, creating confusion about authority relationships that could affect service quality and operational efficiency. Please continue following established protocols, I instructed Maria. Any significant changes to operations or policy will be communicated through appropriate management channels with proper documentation and authorization. Maria's relief was evident as she confirmed that professional standards would be maintained despite family member behavior that seemed to assume different authority relationships. She had been professionally managing similar situations for years, understanding how to provide excellent service while protecting operational integrity from well-meaning but misguided family interference. But Stephanie's presumptuous behavior extended beyond facility usage into areas that directly affected my investment returns. During one of her unauthorized visits, she had discussions with the head winemaker about potential changes to production methods that would reduce output in favor of what she considered more traditional approaches. She was essentially recommending operational changes that would diminish the financial performance of assets she did not own. The winemaker, Carlos Mendoza, had 27 years of experience producing award-winning wines at Montrose Vineyards. His expertise had been crucial to maintaining the quality reputation that supported premium pricing and strong investment returns. Stephanie's suggestions revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between traditional methods and commercial viability in competitive wine markets. She believes we should reduce production volume to focus exclusively on small-batch premium wines, Carlos explained during our quarterly operational review. While quality focus is admirable, the economic realities of vineyard operations require balanced production strategies that serve multiple market segments effectively. His analysis confirmed my own understanding of the business fundamentals that made Montrose Vineyards profitable as an investment property. Stephanie's romantic vision of artisanal wine production would reduce revenue streams while increasing per-unit costs, creating a business model that might satisfy aesthetic preferences but would not generate returns sufficient to justify continued ownership. The situation required careful management to preserve both family relationships and investment performance. I needed to protect operational decision-making from well-intentioned but economically destructive interference, while maintaining the family access that had been part of my original acquisition strategy. The solution involved establishing clearer protocols for family member interactions with vineyard staff, implemented through management channels rather than direct confrontation with Stephanie. New policies required that operational discussions with family members be documented and reviewed with ownership representatives before implementation, creating professional barriers to impulsive decision-making that could affect business performance. These protocols were presented as standard business practices rather than responses to specific family member behavior, allowing Stephanie to maintain dignity while protecting my investment interests from her increasingly presumptuous assertions of authority over property she did not own. However, the policy changes seemed to encourage rather than discourage her sense of proprietorship over Montrose Vineyards. She interpreted new protocols as evidence that the vineyard was becoming more professionally managed in preparation for the family foundation she was supposedly establishing, rather than understanding them as protection for existing ownership interests. Her misinterpretation led to even more ambitious planning for events and initiatives that assumed family control over property rights and operational decisions. She began developing proposals for expanded wine club memberships, enhanced agritourism offerings, and partnership arrangements with local restaurants that would require substantial capital investment and fundamental changes to business strategy. The proposals revealed genuine creativity and marketing insight, but they were developed without consultation with actual ownership or consideration of financial implications for existing investment structures. She was essentially creating business plans for assets she could not legally commit to proposed activities. More problematically, she had begun representing herself to outside vendors and potential partners as the family spokesperson for Montrose Vineyards development initiatives. Local wedding planners, catering companies, and event coordinators were receiving inquiries from someone who presented herself as authorized to negotiate contracts and establish business relationships on behalf of the vineyard. These external representations created potential legal and financial liabilities that extended far beyond family relationship management. If Stephanie succeeded in creating binding obligations based on her assumed authority, my investment could face contractual disputes and legal challenges that would affect both operational performance and asset value. The situation was approaching a crisis point, where continued tolerance of her presumptuous behavior would create genuine business risks, rather than simply family tension. Professional management of my investment required establishing clear boundaries around who could represent Montrose Vineyards in external business relationships, regardless of family considerations that had previously influenced my approach to this ownership challenge. At the same time, Stephanie's increasing investment in her fantasy of family foundation leadership was making her more attached to outcomes that were impossible without my cooperation. She had begun researching legal structures, consulting with attorneys, and developing detailed governance plans for an organization that could not exist without property owner participation she was not seeking, because she remained unaware of actual ownership realities. The approaching holiday season would bring additional family gatherings that would test the sustainability of current arrangements. Thanksgiving had demonstrated how Stephanie's sense of proprietorship was evolving into concrete planning for permanent institutional changes that assumed authority she did not possess over assets she did not own. Christmas planning was already generating requests for expanded family accommodations and enhanced event services that would require capital expenditures and operational changes affecting my investment returns. The romantic appeal of family celebrations was creating financial implications that needed professional evaluation rather than emotional decision-making. The fundamental question was whether to continue protecting family relationships through tolerance of increasingly problematic behavior, or to establish professional boundaries that would preserve investment value while potentially creating family conflict that could affect long-term dynamics in unpredictable ways. Either choice carried significant risks and opportunities that required careful consideration of both immediate tactical needs and long-term strategic objectives for managing family relationships, while protecting substantial financial interests in premium agricultural property that had become the inadvertent center of family power dynamics none of them understood. The approaching Christmas celebration would likely force resolution of tensions that had been building for months, as Stephanie's assumptions about family authority over Montrose Vineyards collided with operational realities that required actual owner approval for proposed changes that could no longer be accommodated through diplomatic management and indirect policy adjustments. The Christmas season brought Stephanie's presumptuous behavior to a crescendo that would ultimately force the revelation I had been strategically postponing for nearly a year. Her planning for what she grandly termed, quote, the first annual Montrose family Christmas celebration had evolved into an elaborate production that assumed unlimited access to vineyard facilities and unlimited authority to commit resources she did not control. The scope of her vision became apparent during a family planning call in early December, when she outlined arrangements that would have impressed professional event coordinators with their ambition and detail. She had envisioned a 3-day celebration featuring wine tastings, gourmet dinners, guest accommodations, and entertainment that would transform Montrose Vineyards into a private resort for extended family members and their invited guests. I have been working with the most wonderful wedding planner in the Valley, Stephanie announced during the conference call that included 12 family members from 3 states. Jennifer Walsh has experience with luxury destination events, and she has developed the most amazing program for our Christmas celebration. We are talking about creating a signature family tradition that future generations will treasure forever. Her enthusiasm was infectious among family members who were unaware of the financial and logistical implications of her proposed celebration. They heard only the appealing prospect of an enhanced holiday gathering rather than understanding the complex operational requirements and substantial costs associated with transforming a working vineyard into a temporary luxury resort. Jennifer Walsh had indeed developed an impressive program based on Stephanie's assurances that family authority extended to unlimited use of vineyard facilities and resources. The proposed schedule included private wine tastings with the head winemaker, multi-course dinners prepared by imported chefs, live entertainment in the vineyard's event spaces, and overnight accommodations for 32 family members and guests. The financial implications were staggering. Stephanie's Christmas celebration would require approximately $60,000 in catering, entertainment, staffing, and facility costs, not including the opportunity costs of dedicating vineyard resources to private family use during peak holiday booking season, when corporate events and private parties generated substantial revenue. More problematically, she had begun making commitments to vendors and service providers based on her assumed authority to authorize expenditures on behalf of Montrose Vineyards. Catering deposits, entertainment contracts, and accommodation arrangements were being finalized without any consultation with actual ownership or consideration of financial authorization procedures. The situation created immediate business risks that extended far beyond family relationship management. If Stephanie succeeded in creating binding financial obligations through unauthorized representations of authority, my investment would face contractual disputes and payment demands that could affect both operational cash flow and legal standing with vendor relationships. Professional management of the crisis required immediate intervention to protect business interests, while attempting to preserve family relationships that had been complicated by months of enabling Stephanie's fantasy of proprietorship over assets she did not own. The approaching Christmas celebration had become a deadline for resolving tensions that could no longer be managed through diplomatic accommodation, Maria Santos contacted me with urgent concerns about vendor inquiries and contract authorization requests that exceeded her authority to approve without direct ownership consultation. Mrs. Harrison, we have received contracts totaling over $70,000 for Christmas event services that Mrs. Stephanie has apparently authorized on behalf of the vineyard, she explained during an emergency phone conversation. The vendors are requesting signed agreements and deposit payments that require ownership approval before we can proceed. Her professional discretion had protected my investment from unauthorized financial commitments, but the situation was rapidly approaching a point where vendor expectations and family member assumptions would create conflicts that could not be resolved without revealing actual ownership structures that had been carefully protected for strategic reasons. The most immediate concern involved Jennifer Walsh, the wedding planner who had developed elaborate Christmas celebration proposals based on Stephanie's assurances of family authority over vineyard operations. Jennifer had invested substantial time and resources in creating custom event designs, coordinating vendor relationships, and developing logistics plans for a celebration that could not proceed without my explicit authorization as the legal owner. A meeting with Jennifer became necessary to understand the scope of commitments that had been made on behalf of my property, and to determine whether the proposed celebration could be modified to accommodate both family expectations and business realities that required professional management rather than emotional decision-making. Jennifer Walsh operated from a beautifully appointed office in downtown McMinnville, where her walls displayed photographs from luxury weddings and corporate events that demonstrated her expertise in managing sophisticated celebrations for demanding clients. Her reputation in the Valley was built on delivering flawless events that exceeded client expectations, while maintaining strict professional standards for vendor relationships and financial management. Mrs. Harrison, she began after we had exchanged introductions and established the confidential nature of our conversation. I must admit I am somewhat confused about the authorization structure for the Montrose Christmas celebration. Mrs. Stephanie has been representing herself as the family spokesperson for event planning, but the contracts require signature authority that she apparently does not possess. Her diplomatic language could not disguise the fundamental problem that Stephanie's behavior had created for professional service providers who required clear authorization chains for substantial financial commitments. Jennifer had developed plans based on assumptions about family authority that were proving inconsistent with actual business operations at Montrose Vineyards. What specific commitments have been made? I asked, though I suspected the answer would require significant financial and logistical adjustments to proposed celebration plans. Jennifer outlined a comprehensive event program that would have been appropriate for a luxury resort rather than a private family gathering. The proposed celebration included imported seafood for a formal dinner, professional musicians for evening entertainment, floral arrangements throughout the vineyard facilities, and coordination with local hotels for guest accommodations that exceeded the property's available lodging capacity. The total investment for this celebration would be approximately $85,000, Jennifer continued, which represents a substantial commitment for a private family event. Mrs. Stephanie assured me that cost was not a consideration because the family views this as an investment in establishing permanent holiday traditions at Montrose Vineyards. The financial scope confirmed my concerns about Stephanie's complete disconnection from economic realities that governed commercial vineyard operations. She had authorized expenses that exceeded the quarterly operational budget for a working agricultural business, treating my investment property as if it were a private family estate with unlimited resources for personal entertainment. More concerning were the timeline commitments that would affect scheduled operations during peak season, when vineyard facilities generated substantial revenue through corporate events and private parties. The proposed Christmas celebration would monopolize event spaces and staff resources during the most profitable period of the year, creating opportunity costs that compounded the direct expenses of Stephanie's elaborate plans. Jennifer, I need to be direct about the authorization situation, I said, recognizing that professional resolution required honest communication rather than continued diplomatic evasion. The family member who has been working with you does not have authority to commit vineyard resources for this celebration. Any agreements will require approval from actual ownership before they can be implemented. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern as she processed the implications of what I was explaining. Professional event planners understood the legal and financial risks associated with unauthorized client representations, and she was clearly recognizing that substantial time and resource investments might not result in confirmed business if actual authorization was unavailable. "What does this mean for the contracts and deposits that have been discussed?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already understood the problematic implications for her business relationship with both the family and the vineyard. The situation required careful management to protect both Jennifer's professional interests and my own business needs, while avoiding unnecessary damage to family relationships that could be preserved through appropriate boundary setting, rather than confrontational revelation of ownership structures that had been strategically protected. The celebration can potentially proceed in a modified form that accommodates both family gathering needs and vineyard operational requirements, I explained. However, the scale and expense of current proposals exceed what can be authorized for private family use of commercial facilities during peak revenue season. Jennifer's relief was evident, as she understood that professional resolution was possible without complete cancellation of business relationships that had required substantial development time and creative investment. She was experienced in managing client expectations when initial proposals exceeded practical constraints, and she immediately began suggesting modifications that could preserve celebration objectives while reducing financial and operational impacts. "We could certainly develop a more modest celebration that maintains the special character Mrs. Stephanie envisioned while working within more practical resource parameters," she offered. Many families prefer intimate gatherings that focus on personal connection rather than elaborate production values. Her professionalism provided a pathway for resolving immediate business concerns while preparing for the more challenging task of communicating revised celebration parameters to family members who had been enthusiastically anticipating the elaborate production Stephanie had promised. The conversation with Jennifer concluded with agreements for modified celebration plans that would cost approximately $25,000 rather than $85,000. Utilize vineyard facilities during off-peak periods that did not conflict with revenue-generating bookings, and require proper authorization procedures that acknowledged actual ownership structures rather than assumed family authority. But implementing these modifications would require explaining to Stephanie why her elaborate plans could not proceed as originally envisioned, a conversation that would inevitably reveal the ownership realities she had been operating without understanding for nearly a year. The Christmas celebration had become the catalyst for confrontation that could no longer be avoided through diplomatic management and indirect policy adjustments. The family planning call scheduled for December 15th would provide the forum for addressing authorization questions that could not be resolved without honest communication about actual property ownership and decision-making authority. Stephanie's expectations for the Christmas celebration had evolved beyond what could be accommodated through continued tolerance of her presumptuous behavior. Preparing for that conversation required careful consideration of how to reveal ownership information in ways that would protect both business interests and family relationships, while establishing clear boundaries for future interactions between family members and vineyard operations. The revelation would fundamentally alter family dynamics that had been based on incorrect assumptions about authority, relationships, and resource availability. The strategic challenge involved timing the revelation to minimize damage to family harmony, while establishing operational boundaries that would protect investment performance from well-intentioned but economically destructive interference. Stephanie's attachment to her fantasy of family foundation leadership had created emotional investments that would make practical boundaries feel like personal rejection rather than necessary business management. Michael's position in this developing conflict required particular consideration, as his relationships with both his sister and his wife could be affected by revelations that had been strategically withheld for months. His conflict avoidance tendencies had enabled Stephanie's presumptuous behavior, but they also reflected his genuine desire to maintain family harmony in situations where competing interests made consensus difficult to achieve. The December 15th family call would test whether honest communication about ownership realities could establish sustainable boundaries for family member interactions with commercial vineyard operations, or whether Stephanie's emotional investment in her authority fantasy would create lasting conflicts that could affect both business performance and family relationships in unpredictable ways. Either outcome would be preferable to continued tolerance of unauthorized representations that created legal and financial risks for my investment, while enabling behavior that was becoming increasingly problematic for professional vineyard management. The Christmas celebration deadline had created an opportunity to resolve tensions that had been building for months through strategic revelation of ownership realities that could no longer be avoided. The question was not whether to reveal my ownership of Montrose Vineyards, but how to do so in ways that would establish appropriate boundaries while preserving family relationships that remained valuable, despite the management challenges they had created, through months of assumptions about authority that bore no relationship to actual legal and financial realities governing commercial agricultural operations in competitive wine markets. The conference call scheduled for December 15th began exactly as I had anticipated, with Stephanie's voice dominating the conversation from the moment family members finished connecting from their respective locations across 3 states. Her enthusiasm for the Christmas celebration had reached fever pitch during the 2 weeks since our previous group discussion, and she launched immediately into detailed updates about vendor confirmations and enhanced program elements that demonstrated her complete disconnection from authorization realities. "Everyone, I have the most exciting news about our Christmas celebration," she announced before anyone else could speak. "Jennifer Walsh has outdone herself with the final program design. We are talking about a truly magical experience that will establish Montrose Vineyards as the permanent center of our family traditions for generations to come." Her choice of words revealed the fundamental assumption underlying all her planning efforts. She genuinely believed that family consensus could establish permanent claims over property usage and operational decisions, treating commercial vineyard facilities as if they were inherited family estate rather than privately owned business assets that required actual owner authorization for proposed activities. The irony of her declaration was particularly acute because she was describing permanent arrangements for property that belonged entirely to the family member she had consistently marginalized through seating assignments, conversation exclusions, and condescending offers of administrative assistance. Her vision of family legacy was being constructed on foundations she did not understand and could not control. The celebration will begin Friday evening with a private wine tasting featuring our finest vintages, followed by a formal dinner prepared by Chef Antoine Dubois, who typically works only with Portland's most exclusive restaurants. Stephanie continued, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who believed she had secured exceptional arrangements through superior planning and social connections. I listened to her detailed description of the proposed weekend, while simultaneously reviewing the cost analysis Jennifer Walsh had prepared during our private meeting. The financial implications were staggering. Stephanie's enhanced celebration would require approximately $95,000 in direct expenses, not including opportunity costs from dedicating vineyard facilities to private family use during peak holiday booking season. More concerning were the operational commitments she had made without understanding the complex logistics required for executing events of this scale at working agricultural properties. Professional catering for 32 guests required specialized equipment, additional staffing, and facility modifications that would affect normal vineyard operations for several days before and after the actual celebration. Chef Dubois will be arriving Thursday to begin preparation, Stephanie explained, apparently unaware that professional kitchen takeovers required coordination with existing staff schedules and operational protocols that governed commercial facility usage. He needs exclusive access to the vineyard kitchen facilities from Thursday evening through Sunday morning to ensure proper preparation and presentation standards. Her casual announcement of kitchen monopolization revealed the depth of her misunderstanding about vineyard operations during peak season. The kitchen facilities she was committing to exclusive chef usage were scheduled for corporate events and private parties that generated substantial revenue throughout the holiday period. Displacing confirmed bookings to accommodate family celebrations would create legal and financial liabilities that extended far beyond the immediate costs of enhanced catering arrangements. Michael's father, David, responded with enthusiasm that confirmed the family's general lack of awareness regarding business implications of Stephanie's increasingly elaborate planning. "This sounds absolutely wonderful, Stephanie. You have outdone yourself with these arrangements. The entire family will be talking about this celebration for years to come." His praise encouraged Stephanie to provide even more detailed descriptions of arrangements that demonstrated her growing sense of proprietorship, over vineyard resources and decision-making authority. She had begun referring to, quote, our winemaker and our facilities, as if family relationship had conferred ownership rights that justified unlimited access to commercial assets. I have also arranged for professional photography throughout the weekend, she continued, her excitement building as she described additional enhancements to the originally modest family gathering. Marcus Chen will be documenting everything to create a commemorative album that captures the beginning of our new family tradition at Montrose Vineyards. The professional photography represented another unauthorized commitment that would affect vineyard operations beyond the immediate celebration period. Commercial photography at working agricultural properties required permits, insurance coordination, and operational adjustments that needed owner approval before agreements could be finalized with external service providers. Victoria Sterling, Michael's aunt, who had expressed earlier reservations about increasingly elaborate celebration plans, finally voiced concerns that other family members had been reluctant to articulate directly. Stephanie, these arrangements sound wonderful, but I am curious about the authorization process for using vineyard facilities so extensively. Have you confirmed that the family has authority to commit these resources? Quote. Her question represented the opening I had been anticipating for months. The authorization concerns that Victoria Sterling was raising provided a natural forum for revealing ownership realities that could no longer be avoided without creating substantial business risks for my investment property. That raises an important question about decision-making authority at Montrose Vineyards, I said, speaking for the first time since the call had begun. There seems to be some confusion about who has authorization to commit vineyard resources for private events of this scale. The silence that followed my comment was profound. Family members who had been enthusiastically discussing celebration details suddenly recognized that fundamental questions about authority and authorization had not been addressed during months of increasingly elaborate planning discussions. Stephanie's response revealed her assumption that family member challenges to her authority were inappropriate rather than necessary for responsible resource management. Victoria, I think we all understand that this celebration represents our family's commitment to preserving our connection to Montrose Vineyards. The details about authorization are administrative matters that can be resolved through proper channels. Her dismissive tone demonstrated the depth of her investment in maintaining authority relationships that existed only in her imagination. She was treating legitimate questions about property rights and business authorization as administrative obstacles, rather than fundamental legal requirements that governed commercial vineyard operations. Actually, the authorization questions are not administrative matters, I replied, recognizing that diplomatic language was no longer sufficient for addressing business realities that required immediate resolution. They represent fundamental legal requirements that must be satisfied before vineyard resources can be committed for private events of any scale. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, perhaps sensing that his wife's comments were moving beyond general concerns toward specific challenges to his sister's assumed authority. His conflict avoidance tendencies were being tested by developing tensions that could not be resolved through continued diplomatic accommodation of competing interests. What specific authorization concerns are you referring to? Asked Margaret Foster, Michael's cousin who worked in corporate law and understood the importance of proper authority chains for business decision-making. Are there legal or financial constraints that affect family usage of vineyard facilities? Her question provided the perfect opportunity to reveal ownership information in a professional context that emphasized business requirements rather than personal conflicts between family members. The conversation had evolved naturally toward topics that required honest communication about actual property ownership and decision-making authority. The authorization concerns relate to the fact that Montrose Vineyards is privately owned commercial property that requires actual owner approval for all facility usage and resource commitments, I explained, maintaining a professional tone despite the personal satisfaction of finally revealing information that had been strategically protected for nearly a year. The confusion that followed my statement was immediate and pronounced. Family members who had assumed collective family ownership or control over vineyard property were suddenly confronting realities that contradicted fundamental assumptions underlying their celebration planning and future relationship expectations. "What do you mean, privately owned?" asked David, his voice carrying genuine bewilderment, The Montrose family has operated this vineyard for decades. We understood that family access was established through historical relationships and ongoing connections. His question revealed the depth of misunderstanding that had characterized family assumptions about their relationship to vineyard property. They had conflated historical access privileges with ownership rights, creating expectations for permanent facility usage that bore no relationship to actual legal and financial structures governing commercial agricultural operations. The Montrose family sold the vineyard 18 months ago to address estate tax obligations and liquidity challenges. I continued, recognizing that complete revelation was now necessary for resolving authorization questions that could not be addressed through continued diplomatic evasion. The property is currently owned through Harrison Investment Group, which acquired the vineyard as part of a diversified agricultural portfolio. The silence that followed this revelation was even more profound than the earlier pause. Family members were processing information that fundamentally altered their understanding of their relationship to property they had considered permanently accessible through family connections and historical traditions. Stephanie's response demonstrated her inability to accept information that contradicted her elaborate planning and assumed authority over vineyard operations. "That cannot be accurate," she said, her voice carrying denial rather than genuine inquiry about ownership realities. "We have been planning family events and discussing long-term traditions based on our ongoing connection to Montrose vineyards." Her denial revealed the emotional investment she had made in maintaining fantasy relationships that justified her sense of proprietorship over property and authority over decision-making processes that affected substantial business assets. Accepting ownership realities would require abandoning months of planning and assumed authority that had become central to her identity within family dynamics. "The ownership information is entirely accurate and can be verified through public records," I replied, maintaining professional composure despite the personal satisfaction of finally establishing appropriate boundaries for family member interactions with my investment property. Harrison Investment Group holds clear title to all vineyard assets, including land, facilities, equipment, and operational contracts. Michael finally spoke for the first time since the ownership revelation had begun transforming family conversation dynamics. "Victoria, when did you learn about this ownership change? Why was this information not shared during our previous discussions about family celebrations and long-term traditions?" His questions revealed his own confusion about information that had been available through his personal relationship with me, but had not been explicitly connected to family planning discussions that had proceeded based on incorrect ownership assumptions. The separation between professional investment decisions and family relationship dynamics had created communication gaps that were now affecting both business operations and family harmony. "I have been aware of the ownership structure since the acquisition was completed," I answered, recognizing that complete honesty was now required for establishing sustainable relationships between family members and commercial vineyard operations. "Harrison Investment Group is my investment management company. I am the owner of Montrose Vineyards." The impact of this revelation was immediate and dramatic. Family members who had spent months planning celebrations and discussing traditions based on assumed family ownership were suddenly confronting the reality that all their discussions had been taking place at the discretion of the family member they had consistently marginalized through seating arrangements, conversation exclusions, and condescending offers of administrative assistance. Stephanie's response revealed the complete inversion of authority relationships that my ownership revelation had created. "That is impossible," she said, her voice carrying shock rather than acceptance of information that contradicted everything she had assumed about family dynamics and her own position within property usage decisions. "You cannot own Montrose Vineyards. You are not even really part of our family traditions and celebrations." Her statement demonstrated the fundamental irony that had been building for months. The family member she had excluded from meaningful participation in planning discussions actually possessed complete authority over all the resources and facilities she had been treating as her personal domain for coordinating elaborate celebrations and establishing permanent traditions. The revelation had transformed Stephanie from self-appointed family authority into someone whose continued access to vineyard facilities depended entirely on the goodwill of the woman she had spent months dismissing as peripheral to family dynamics and unworthy of meaningful inclusion in decision-making processes. The ownership documentation is readily available for review, I continued, maintaining professional demeanor despite the personal vindication of finally establishing actual authority relationships that had been inverted through months of assumed family control over commercial property assets. All facility usage and resource commitments require owner authorization before agreements can be finalized with external service providers. The conversation had reached a turning point where continued family access to Montrose Vineyards would depend on accepting ownership realities and establishing appropriate relationships between family members and commercial vineyard operations that required professional management rather than assumed authority, based on historical connections and wishful thinking about permanent access rights. The silence that followed my ownership revelation stretched across the conference call for nearly 30 seconds. A profound quiet that reflected the magnitude of mental reorganization each family member was experiencing as they processed information that fundamentally altered their understanding of relationships, authority, and future expectations regarding Montrose Vineyards. When conversation finally resumed, it was Margaret Foster who spoke first. Her legal background, providing the analytical framework necessary to address practical implications of ownership disclosure, rather than becoming mired in emotional responses to unexpected information. Her approach demonstrated the professional perspective that would be required for establishing sustainable relationships between family members and commercial vineyard operations. Victoria, this revelation certainly changes the context for our Christmas celebration planning, she said, her voice carrying recognition of business realities rather than personal disappointment about altered family dynamics. What authorization process do you require for family events, and what parameters govern facility usage for private gatherings? Her question acknowledged actual ownership authority while seeking practical information about how family relationships could continue within appropriate business boundaries. Margaret understood that productive resolution required accepting new realities rather than challenging ownership information that was documented through public records and legal documentation. The contrast between Margaret's professional acceptance and Stephanie's emotional denial was immediately apparent when Stephanie responded to my ownership revelation with accusations that revealed her complete inability to process information that contradicted months of assumptions about family authority and her own position within vineyard decision-making structures. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Stephanie declared, her voice carrying indignation rather than recognition of business facts that required acknowledgement regardless of personal preferences. "You cannot simply declare ownership of property that has been central to our family traditions for years. There must be legal challenges available to protect family interests and historical access rights." Her response demonstrated the depth of her emotional investment in maintaining fantasy authority over vineyard operations. Rather than accepting documented ownership realities, she was immediately seeking mechanisms to challenge or circumvent actual property rights through legal theories that bore no relationship to established business law governing commercial agricultural assets. David's intervention attempted to restore diplomatic conversation dynamics, while addressing practical concerns about Christmas celebration arrangements that had been proceeding based on incorrect assumptions about authorization requirements and family access privileges. "Perhaps we should focus on immediate questions about the Christmas celebration rather than debating ownership details that can be verified through appropriate channels," he suggested, though his tone revealed uncertainty about how family gatherings could proceed within business parameters that had not been previously understood or acknowledged. His diplomatic approach reflected genuine desire to preserve family harmony while accommodating ownership realities that required fundamental adjustments to expectations about vineyard access and resource availability. However, his suggestion that ownership details could be set aside for practical planning purposes misunderstood the legal requirements governing commercial property usage for private events. Michael finally spoke directly to address the personal dimensions of ownership disclosure that affected his relationships with both his wife and his sister. His position was particularly complex because he had been aware of my investment activities while remaining passive during months of family planning discussions that proceeded based on incorrect ownership assumptions. "I think we need to have separate conversations about business requirements and family relationships," he said carefully, recognizing that his own communication choices had contributed to current confusion about authorization structures and decision-making authority. Victoria's investment decisions were made for sound financial reasons that do not necessarily reflect personal feelings about family access to vineyard facilities. His attempt to separate business considerations from family dynamics revealed his continued preference for avoiding direct confrontation with his sister's presumptuous behavior. However, the ownership revelation had created circumstances where business requirements and family relationships could not be cleanly separated without establishing clear boundaries for future interactions. Victoria Sterling demonstrated understanding of both business realities and family relationship management by asking practical questions about sustainable arrangements, rather than challenging ownership authority or expressing emotional disappointment about altered access expectations. What would be reasonable parameters for family events that acknowledge your ownership responsibilities while preserving opportunities for continued family gatherings? She asked, her tone reflecting acceptance of new realities combined with genuine interest in maintaining positive relationships within appropriate business boundaries. Her question provided the foundation for productive discussion about how family celebrations could proceed within commercial vineyard operations that required professional management, rather than assumed authority, based on historical connections and wishful thinking about permanent access privileges. Family events can certainly continue at Montrose Vineyards, I responded, recognizing that generous access policies would serve both relationship preservation and business marketing objectives by maintaining positive community connections while demonstrating vineyard hospitality capabilities to potential commercial clients. However, all events require advance authorization through proper channels, coordination with existing bookings and operational schedules, and financial arrangements that reflect actual costs for facility usage, staffing, and resource commitments. Private family gatherings will be managed under the same professional standards that govern all vineyard events. My explanation established clear business boundaries while confirming continued family access opportunities within appropriate operational frameworks. The parameters I outlined reflected standard commercial practices for premium event venues, rather than exclusionary policies designed to punish family members for previous presumptuous behavior. Stephanie's response to these reasonable business requirements revealed her fundamental inability to accept any constraints on her assumed authority over vineyard operations. Rather than acknowledging ownership realities and working within established parameters, she immediately began challenging the legitimacy of professional management standards for commercial agricultural properties. These restrictions are completely unnecessary and punitive, she declared, apparently interpreting standard business practices as personal attacks rather than professional requirements that governed all vineyard operations, regardless of client relationships. Family gatherings should not be subject to commercial authorization processes and financial arrangements that treat relatives like paying customers. Her objection demonstrated complete misunderstanding of business principles that required consistent operational standards for protecting asset value and ensuring sustainable financial performance. Commercial vineyard facilities could not maintain professional reputation and operational efficiency, while making exceptions for family members who assumed unlimited access privileges without regard for costs or scheduling requirements. Margaret Foster immediately recognized the problematic implications of Stephanie's demands for exemptions from standard business practices. Her legal experience provided insight into operational requirements that governed commercial hospitality venues and agricultural businesses that served multiple client categories simultaneously. Stephanie, consistent operational standards are necessary for maintaining business viability and legal compliance, she explained, her professional perspective offering education rather than confrontation about commercial reality that could not be altered through emotional appeals or family relationship claims. Vineyard facilities that make exceptions for family members while maintaining different standards for paying clients create liability exposures and operational inefficiencies that affect overall business performance. Professional management requires treating all events according to established protocols regardless of personal relationships. Her analysis confirmed my approach to family event management while providing authoritative explanation about business requirements that existed independent of personal preferences or family relationship dynamics. Margaret's support was particularly valuable because her legal credentials and family member status gave her comments credibility that transcended potential accusations of self-interested policymaking. The conversation dynamics shifted significantly as family members began processing ownership realities and their implications for future relationships with vineyard facilities. Those with business experience, like Margaret and Victoria Sterling, demonstrated understanding of professional requirements and willingness to work within appropriate boundaries for maintaining positive family connections. However, Stephanie's continued resistance to accepting ownership authority and business parameters revealed deeper issues about her identity investment in assumed vineyard proprietorship and family authority that had become central to her self-perception over previous months of elaborate planning and presumptuous decision-making. "I refuse to accept that family traditions and celebrations must be subordinated to commercial considerations," she announced, her voice carrying determination rather than recognition of practical constraints that governed all commercial property usage regardless of family member preferences or historical access expectations. "Our family's connection to Montrose Vineyards transcends business relationships and financial arrangements. Some values cannot be reduced to commercial transactions and authorization protocols." Her declaration revealed romantic idealization of family relationships that ignored practical realities governing commercial vineyard operations in competitive markets, where professional standards determined business success and operational sustainability. Stephanie was demanding exemptions from business requirements based on emotional appeals, rather than practical arguments about sustainable facility management. The fundamental problem with her position was that vineyard operations required consistent professional standards for maintaining asset value, operational efficiency, and legal compliance regardless of personal relationships or family connection claims. Commercial agricultural properties could not survive economically while making exceptions for family members who refused to acknowledge ownership authority and business requirements. David attempted another diplomatic intervention designed to preserve family harmony while acknowledging ownership realities that required acceptance rather than continued challenge, through emotional appeals and romantic idealization of family privilege exemptions. "Perhaps we should postpone detailed planning discussions until everyone has had time to process ownership information and consider how family celebrations can proceed within appropriate business frameworks," he suggested, recognizing that productive resolution required calmer consideration of practical arrangements rather than immediate emotional responses to unexpected information. His suggestion reflected wisdom about conflict resolution that recognized the need for adjustment periods when fundamental assumptions about relationships and authority required substantial mental reorganization. However, postponement would not alter ownership realities or business requirements that governed vineyard operations regardless of family member acceptance or emotional comfort levels. "The Christmas celebration timeline requires immediate resolution of authorization questions," I responded, acknowledging David's diplomatic intentions, while emphasizing practical constraints that could not be delayed through extended discussion periods or gradual acceptance processes. "Vendor contracts and facility reservations have specific deadlines that must be met regardless of family member comfort levels with ownership disclosure and business management requirements. Professional vineyard operations cannot be postponed while family members adjust to new information about actual authority structures." My statement established clear business priorities while maintaining respectful tone toward family members who were experiencing genuine surprise about ownership realities they had not anticipated during months of celebration planning and tradition establishment discussions. The conversation concluded with arrangements for individual discussions between family members and vineyard management regarding specific event requirements and authorization processes. This approach would allow more productive problem-solving without the group dynamics that had enabled Stephanie's resistance to accepting ownership authority and business parameters. Margaret and Victoria Sterling immediately expressed interest in understanding authorization procedures and working within established business frameworks for maintaining positive family relationships while respecting commercial operational requirements. Their professional attitudes demonstrated that family celebrations could continue successfully within appropriate boundaries. However, Stephanie's final comment revealed her continued determination to challenge ownership authority rather than accepting business realities that required acknowledgement regardless of personal preferences about family privilege and assumed access rights. "This situation is far from resolved," she declared before ending her connection to the conference call. I will be investigating legal options for protecting family interests and challenging unauthorized property acquisitions that threaten established traditions and community connections." Quote, her threat confirmed that ownership disclosure had not resolved fundamental conflicts about authority relationships and business management requirements. Stephanie's emotional investment in vineyard proprietorship had created expectations that could not be satisfied through reasonable accommodation within commercial operational frameworks. The aftermath of ownership revelation had clarified family member positions regarding acceptance of business realities versus continued resistance to professional management standards that governed commercial vineyard operations. Productive relationships would require acknowledging actual authority structures, rather than maintaining fantasy family control over commercial agricultural properties. The legal challenge materialized exactly 10 days after the conference call revelation, delivered through certified mail in the form of a formal demand letter from Peterson Walsh & Associates, a Portland law firm specializing in property disputes and family litigation. The document represented Stephanie's escalation from emotional denial to aggressive legal action, demonstrating her commitment to challenging documented ownership, rather than accepting business realities that required acknowledgement regardless of personal preferences. The demand letter was professionally drafted, but built upon legal theories that reflected fundamental misunderstanding of property law and commercial acquisition procedures. Stephanie's attorney had crafted arguments based on her emotional narrative, rather than factual analysis of transaction documentation and ownership records that were readily available through public filing systems and title insurance companies. The central claim alleged that my acquisition of Montrose Vineyards constituted, quote, fraudulent concealment of material information that had, quote, damaged family interests and disrupted established traditions. The legal theory suggested that my failure to disclose investment activities to family members somehow invalidated legitimate commercial transactions that had been properly executed through established legal channels with appropriate professional oversight. More problematically, the demand letter requested immediate quote restoration of family access rights and quote Stephanie was essentially arguing that family members possessed legal rights to commercial property usage that superseded actual ownership authority and business management requirements. The document concluded with threats of litigation that would seek full disclosure of acquisition circumstances, restoration of family property interests, and damages for interference with established family traditions. The aggressive tone reflected Stephanie's determination to challenge ownership through legal intimidation, rather than accepting documented property rights that had been legitimately acquired through standard commercial transactions. My initial response involved consultation with Rebecca Martinez, my corporate attorney who had overseen the original Montrose Vineyards acquisition and understood both the transaction documentation and the legal frameworks governing commercial agricultural property ownership. Her analysis of Stephanie's legal challenge was swift and definitive. "This demand letter lacks merit under established property law," Rebecca explained during our emergency consultation meeting. "The claims regarding fraudulent concealment are baseless because property owners have no legal obligation to disclose investment activities to family members or community stakeholders. Commercial acquisitions are governed by contract law and regulatory compliance, not family notification requirements." Her professional assessment confirmed my understanding that Stephanie's legal challenge represented emotional response rather than legitimate property dispute. The acquisition of Montrose Vineyards had been conducted through appropriate legal channels, with full documentation and regulatory compliance that would withstand any reasonable legal scrutiny. However, Rebecca continued, the litigation threat does require formal response to protect your interests and establish clear boundaries regarding property rights and business operations. Allowing unmeritorious claims to proceed without appropriate response can create complications for commercial operations and asset management activities. Her recommendation involved comprehensive documentation of acquisition procedures and ownership authority that would demonstrate the frivolous nature of Stephanie's legal challenge while establishing clear boundaries for future family member interactions with commercial vineyard operations. The response would serve both defensive and educational purposes. By illustrating how legitimate business activities were protected, under established legal frameworks. The formal response letter, drafted by Rebecca and reviewed by additional attorneys specializing in agricultural property law, addressed each claim raised in Stephanie's demand letter, with specific reference to legal precedents and statutory requirements that governed commercial property acquisitions and ownership authority. The response documented the thorough due diligence procedures that had preceded my acquisition, including environmental assessments, financial audits, title examinations, and regulatory compliance reviews that exceeded standard requirements for commercial agricultural transactions. Every aspect of the purchase had been conducted through established legal channels with appropriate professional oversight and documentation. More importantly, the response clarified legal principles regarding property ownership and family member rights that Stephanie appeared to misunderstand completely. Family members possessed no inherent legal claims to commercial property based on historical access or emotional connections that did not create actual ownership interests or usage rights under established property law. The documentation included acquisition contracts, title insurance policies, regulatory approvals, and professional assessments that demonstrated the legitimate nature of my ownership, while illustrating the comprehensive legal framework that protected commercial property rights against unmeritorious challenges based on family relationship claims or tradition arguments. Rebecca's strategic approach involved not merely defending against Stephanie's challenge, but establishing clear precedent for future family interactions with vineyard operations. The response letter served notice that any additional legal challenges would be met with vigorous defense and potential counterclaims for frivolous litigation and interference with legitimate business operations. The impact of professional legal response became apparent within days when Stephanie's attorney contacted Rebecca to discuss, quote, potential resolution of family property concerns through negotiated arrangements. The shift from aggressive litigation threats to settlement discussions reflected recognition that the initial legal challenge lacked sufficient merit to justify continued investment in expensive litigation procedures. However, the negotiation discussions revealed that Stephanie's fundamental misconceptions about property rights and family authority remained unchanged, despite professional legal education about actual ownership structures and business management requirements. Her proposed settlement terms demonstrated continued expectation of special treatment that exceeded standard commercial arrangements for facility usage and event planning. The proposed settlement included demands for permanent family member access privileges, exemption from standard authorization procedures, and compensation for Christmas celebration planning expenses that had been incurred based on incorrect assumptions about family authority over commercial vineyard operations. Stephanie was essentially requesting legal ratification of fantasy relationships that bore no connection to actual business realities. Rebecca's assessment of settlement proposals was unequivocal. These demands would create precedent for family member interference with commercial operations while providing no corresponding benefits for business activities or asset protection, she explained. Accepting such arrangements would compromise professional management standards and create ongoing liability exposures that could affect vineyard operations and financial performance. Her analysis confirmed my instinctive rejection of settlement terms that would legitimize family member assumptions about special access privileges and operational authority. Commercial vineyard management required consistent professional standards that could not accommodate exemptions for family members who refused to acknowledge ownership authority and business requirements. The strategic decision involved declining settlement discussions while maintaining open communication about reasonable arrangements for family events within established business parameters. This approach would preserve relationship opportunities while protecting commercial operational integrity and legal authority that were essential for sustainable vineyard management. My direct communication with family members who had demonstrated acceptance of ownership realities proceeded through separate channels that avoided Stephanie's legal confrontation while establishing positive precedent for productive family relationships within appropriate business boundaries. Margaret Foster and Victoria Sterling had both expressed interest in working within established frameworks rather than challenging documented ownership authority. The arrangements developed with cooperative family members included advanced booking procedures for family events, transparent pricing structures that reflected actual costs for facility usage and services, and coordination protocols that ensured family celebrations would not conflict with commercial bookings or operational requirements that generated primary revenue streams. These professional arrangements demonstrated that family access could continue successfully within business frameworks that respected ownership authority while providing excellent service standards and facility usage opportunities. The success of cooperative relationships illustrated how reasonable family members could maintain positive connections without demanding exemptions from commercial operational requirements. Margaret Foster's approach was particularly instructive because her legal background provided understanding of business requirements combined with genuine interest in preserving family relationships through appropriate accommodation, rather than confrontational challenges to documented ownership authority. Victoria, I appreciate your willingness to continue family access within professional business frameworks, she said during our private conversation about future event planning procedures. This approach protects both your investment interests and our family relationship opportunities, while maintaining appropriate boundaries for commercial operations. Her professional perspective offered validation for business management decisions, while demonstrating that family members with appropriate understanding could work successfully within established operational parameters. Margaret's cooperation illustrated how respect for ownership authority created foundations for positive long-term relationships that served both family and business interests. The contrast between Margaret's collaborative approach and Stephanie's aggressive legal challenge revealed fundamental differences in character and values that extended far beyond vineyard access issues. Stephanie's determination to challenge documented ownership through frivolous litigation demonstrated willingness to damage family relationships and waste financial resources, rather than accepting business realities that required acknowledgement regardless of personal preferences. Victoria Sterling's response was equally professional and demonstrated understanding that commercial property operations required consistent standards that could not be compromised through family member demands for special treatment or exemptions from established authorization procedures. I understand that vineyard operations must maintain professional standards for all events regardless of family relationships, she acknowledged during our planning discussion for a smaller, more appropriate family gathering. Please provide information about booking procedures and cost structures so we can plan celebrations that work within your business requirements. Her practical approach created opportunities for positive family interactions while respecting ownership authority and commercial operational needs. Victoria Sterling's cooperation demonstrated that family celebrations could proceed successfully when participants accepted appropriate boundaries and worked within established business frameworks, rather than demanding special privileges or challenging documented ownership rights. The modified Christmas celebration proceeded on December 20th, with arrangements that reflected professional event management standards, while providing excellent service and facility access for family members who had demonstrated respect for ownership authority and business requirements. The gathering included 12 family members who had accepted invitation parameters and authorization procedures without demanding exemptions or special treatment. The celebration featured wine tastings conducted by professional vineyard staff, catered dinner service that reflected premium hospitality standards, and facility usage that was coordinated with operational schedules to avoid conflicts with commercial bookings and revenue-generating activities. Family members expressed genuine appreciation for arrangements that provided exceptional experiences within appropriate business boundaries. Most significantly, the successful family celebration demonstrated that professional vineyard management could accommodate family relationships while maintaining commercial operational integrity and asset protection requirements. The event established positive precedent for future family interactions that respected ownership authority while providing excellent service and facility access opportunities. Stephanie's absence from the celebration was notable, but not disruptive to family dynamics or event success. Her decision to maintain legal confrontation rather than accepting reasonable accommodation illustrated how personal investment in fantasy authority could prevent participation in positive family experiences that were available through appropriate collaboration with actual ownership and business management. The legal challenge continued through formal proceedings that confirmed Rebecca's initial assessment regarding the frivolous nature of Stephanie's claims and the comprehensive documentation supporting legitimate ownership authority. The litigation process provided additional evidence that professional legal representation and thorough business practices offered complete protection against unmeritorious challenges to commercial property rights. By year's end, the situation had clarified relationships between family members and commercial vineyard operations, while establishing clear precedent for future interactions that would respect ownership authority and business requirements. Family members who demonstrated appropriate cooperation continued to enjoy excellent access to vineyard facilities within professional frameworks that protected both relationship opportunities and commercial operational integrity. The resolution confirmed that financial independence and professional property management provided effective protection against family member demands for special treatment or exemptions from established business standards. Ownership authority, backed by comprehensive legal documentation and professional management practices, created unassailable foundations for making decisions based on business requirements rather than family relationship pressures or emotional manipulation attempts. The resolution of Stephanie's legal challenge marked the beginning of a transformative period for Montrose Vineyards that demonstrated how professional ownership and strategic management could elevate agricultural assets far beyond their previous operational limitations. The 18 months following the Christmas confrontation became a case study in how visionary leadership combined with sound financial resources could revolutionize traditional wine industry approaches while generating exceptional returns for sophisticated investors. The first major initiative involved comprehensive modernization of production facilities that had been operating below capacity due to previous ownership's conservative approach to capital investment and technological advancement. My analysis of vineyard operations had identified multiple opportunities for enhancing both quality and efficiency through strategic equipment upgrades and process optimization that would position Montrose as a leader in sustainable wine production. The production modernization project required an initial investment of $450,000 in state-of-the-art fermentation systems, temperature-controlled storage facilities, and precision bottling equipment that would increase annual production capacity by 60%, while improving quality consistency and reducing operational costs per unit produced. The financial analysis demonstrated that enhanced production capabilities would generate additional revenue streams sufficient to recover the investment within 36 months, while establishing foundations for sustained growth. More importantly, the modernization program incorporated advanced environmental control systems that would reduce water usage by 40%, eliminate chemical waste streams, and achieve carbon-neutral production standards that appealed to premium market segments willing to pay premium prices for sustainably produced wines. The environmental improvements aligned with consumer preferences while reducing operational costs and regulatory compliance requirements. Carlos Mendoza, the head winemaker whose expertise had been crucial to maintaining Montrose's quality reputation, expressed enthusiasm for modernization initiatives that would provide technological tools for achieving production standards that had previously required compromising between quality and efficiency considerations. These upgrades will allow us to maintain artisanal quality standards while scaling production to meet growing demand from premium distributors and restaurant clients, he explained during our quarterly operational review. The temperature control capabilities alone will improve vintage consistency by eliminating weather-related variations that have affected previous harvest outcomes. His professional assessment confirmed that strategic capital investment could enhance both operational performance and market positioning while preserving the craftsmanship traditions that distinguished Montrose wines in competitive regional markets. The modernization program represented sophisticated understanding of how technology could support rather than replace traditional winemaking expertise. The second major initiative focused on expanding revenue diversification through enhanced hospitality offerings that would leverage Montrose's premium location and facility assets to capture growing agritourism market segments. The strategy involved developing comprehensive event hosting capabilities that would generate substantial revenue streams while showcasing vineyard products to affluent consumers who represented target demographics for premium wine sales. The hospitality expansion required facility modifications that would accommodate corporate retreats, private dining events, and luxury wedding celebrations without compromising ongoing agricultural operations or disrupting wine production activities. The design solutions involved creating dedicated event spaces that shared infrastructure with production facilities while maintaining operational separation that protected both business activities. Jennifer Walsh, the wedding planner who had originally worked with Stephanie on elaborate Christmas celebration proposals, became a valuable partner for developing realistic hospitality programming that reflected actual market demand and operational capabilities, rather than fantasy projections based on unlimited resource assumptions. Victoria, your approach to facility development demonstrates understanding of both client expectations and operational requirements, she said during our consultation about wedding venue capabilities. Many vineyard owners underestimate the infrastructure investments required for hosting premium events, but your planning addresses every detail that affects client satisfaction and operational efficiency. Her professional perspective validated strategic decisions about hospitality expansion, while providing market insights that informed facility design and service standard development. Jennifer's experience with demanding clients offered crucial intelligence about competitive positioning and pricing strategies that would maximize revenue while maintaining operational sustainability. The hospitality expansion program ultimately required investment of $620,000 in facility modifications, equipment purchases, and staff training that would position Montrose as a premier destination for luxury events and corporate functions. The financial projections indicated that enhanced hospitality offerings would generate additional annual revenue exceeding $300,000 while providing marketing exposure that would support premium wine sales growth. The third strategic initiative involved expanding distribution relationships with premium restaurants and specialty retailers that served affluent consumer segments willing to pay premium prices for exceptional quality wines produced through sustainable methods. The market analysis revealed significant demand from establishments that emphasized local sourcing and environmental responsibility while maintaining exacting quality standards. The distribution expansion required developing relationships with wine buyers and restaurant beverage managers who controlled access to premium market segments. These professional relationships demanded consistent product quality, reliable delivery schedules, and marketing support that would differentiate Montrose wines from competitors seeking similar market positioning. The distribution development process revealed how previous ownership's conservative approach had limited market penetration despite producing wines that exceeded quality standards expected by premium buyers. Systematic outreach to targeted establishments resulted in new distribution agreements that would increase annual sales volume by 40%, while commanding price premiums that improved profit margins substantially. Sarah Chen, a sommelier at Portland's most exclusive restaurant who became an advocate for Montrose wines, explained how quality improvements and marketing positioning had enhanced the vineyard's reputation among beverage professionals who influenced consumer preferences in premium market segments. The consistency improvements achieved through production modernization have made Montrose wines reliable choices for wine programs that demand exceptional quality standards, she noted during a professional tasting event. Combined with the sustainability story and local sourcing appeal, these wines offer compelling value propositions for establishments that serve discerning clientele. Her endorsement provided validation for strategic positioning decisions, while demonstrating how operational improvements translated into market advantages that justified premium pricing and enhanced brand recognition among target consumers and beverage industry professionals. The implementation of these strategic initiatives proceeded systematically over 18 months. With each phase designed to build upon previous improvements while generating cash flows that would support continued expansion without requiring additional external financing. The disciplined approach to growth management ensured that operational improvements enhanced rather than strained existing capabilities. The financial results exceeded projections in every category. Wine production increased by 55% while maintaining quality standards that supported premium pricing strategies. Hospitality revenues generated $430,000 in additional annual income while providing marketing exposure that enhanced retail wine sales. Distribution expansion increased wholesale revenue by 62%, while establishing relationships with establishments that served as showcases for Montrose quality and brand positioning. Most significantly, the comprehensive modernization and expansion program had increased the vineyard's appraised value from the original acquisition price of $2.4 million to a current valuation of $4.8 million, representing a 100% return on investment over 30 months while generating substantial annual cash flows that supported continued operational improvements. The transformation of Montrose Vineyards from a conservatively managed family operation into a profitable commercial enterprise demonstrated how professional ownership and strategic management could unlock value that had been constrained by limited vision and inadequate capital investment. The results validated investment decisions while establishing foundations for continued growth and market expansion. The professional success achieved through strategic vineyard management had implications that extended far beyond financial returns and business development outcomes. The transformation demonstrated how competence, vision, and appropriate resources could revolutionize traditional approaches while respecting craft traditions and environmental responsibilities that defined premium wine production. Family members who had accepted ownership realities and worked within appropriate business frameworks benefited substantially from vineyard improvements and expansion activities. Margaret Foster and Victoria Sterling continued enjoying enhanced facility access for family events, while witnessing firsthand how professional management had elevated every aspect of vineyard operations and guest experiences. The improvements you have implemented have transformed Montrose into something truly special, Margaret observed during a family gathering that showcased new hospitality capabilities and enhanced wine offerings. The combination of traditional craftsmanship with modern efficiency creates experiences that exceed anything we had previously imagined possible. Her appreciation reflected recognition that professional ownership had enhanced rather than diminished the values that made Montrose meaningful to family members who approached vineyard relationships with appropriate respect for business requirements and ownership authority. Victoria Sterling expressed similar satisfaction with outcomes that had preserved family access opportunities while elevating operational standards and facility capabilities beyond previous limitations imposed by conservative management and insufficient capital investment. Your vision for Montrose has created something that serves everyone's interests while maintaining the character and quality that made this place special, she said during our review of expansion project outcomes. The professional approach has enhanced every aspect of the vineyard experience while generating obvious financial success. The positive feedback from cooperative family members validated strategic decisions about balancing relationship preservation with business development objectives. Professional management had demonstrated that appropriate boundaries and operational standards enhanced rather than constrained positive family interactions, while protecting commercial interests that required sustainable financial performance. The stark contrast between outcomes achieved through professional management and the limitations that had characterized previous ownership approaches illustrated how vision, competence, and adequate resources could transform traditional agricultural operations, while preserving essential character and quality standards that defined premium wine production. Stephanie's continued absence from family gatherings at Montrose was notable, primarily because her exclusionary behavior had prevented her from witnessing or participating in the remarkable transformation that had elevated every aspect of vineyard operations and guest experiences. Her determination to maintain legal confrontation rather than accepting reasonable accommodation had eliminated opportunities for positive engagement with improved facilities and enhanced programming. The legal proceedings initiated through her frivolous challenge had concluded with complete vindication of ownership authority and comprehensive documentation of legitimate acquisition procedures. The resolution had established clear precedent for property rights protection, while demonstrating the futility of challenging documented ownership through emotional appeals and unfounded legal theories. The professional and financial success achieved through strategic vineyard management provided powerful validation for decisions about boundary setting and authority establishment that had required significant personal resolve during periods of family conflict and legal challenge. The outcomes demonstrated how competence and preparation created unassailable foundations for making decisions based on business merit rather than family pressure or emotional manipulation. The transformation of Montrose Vineyards represented more than successful investment management and business development. The project demonstrated how individual competence and strategic vision could revolutionize traditional approaches while creating value for all stakeholders who approached relationships with appropriate respect for ownership authority and business requirements. The financial independence and professional credibility established through vineyard ownership and management success had fundamentally altered family dynamics, while providing compelling evidence that dismissed family members often possessed capabilities and resources that exceeded the recognition they received from relatives who made assumptions based on limited understanding rather than actual accomplishment and professional competence. The Montrose Vineyards transformation had become a tangible demonstration of how hidden strength, when properly leveraged through strategic action and professional execution, could revolutionize circumstances while providing satisfaction that extended far beyond financial returns to encompass personal vindication and family relationship restructuring that reflected actual rather than assumed authority and capability. The recognition began quietly in the spring of the second year following the vineyard transformation, when Oregon Wine Monthly featured Montrose Vineyards in their annual showcase of emerging industry leaders who were redefining traditional approaches to wine production and agricultural business management. The article highlighted the comprehensive modernization program and strategic positioning that had elevated the vineyard from regional producer to nationally recognized exemplar of sustainable premium wine operations. The magazine profile emphasized the integration of environmental responsibility with commercial success that had become the signature characteristic of Montrose under my ownership and management. The writer, James Richardson, possessed extensive knowledge of Oregon wine industry dynamics and understood the significance of achieving rapid operational transformation while maintaining quality standards and craft traditions that defined premium viticulture. Victoria Harrison has accomplished something remarkable at Montrose Vineyards by demonstrating that environmental sustainability and commercial profitability represent complementary rather than competing objectives, Richardson wrote in his comprehensive analysis of the vineyard's strategic positioning. Her approach to modernization has enhanced traditional winemaking expertise through technological advancement while establishing new standards for responsible agricultural business practices. The article included detailed analysis of production improvements, revenue diversification strategies, and environmental impact reductions that had been achieved through systematic capital investment and professional management practices. The coverage provided authoritative validation of strategic decisions, while introducing Montrose to national audiences of wine industry professionals and sophisticated consumers who valued both quality and environmental responsibility. The industry recognition generated immediate interest from other vineyard owners who sought consultation regarding modernization strategies and sustainable business practices that could enhance their own operations without compromising craft traditions or quality standards. The requests for advisory services revealed how successful transformation of Montrose had established my reputation as an authority on agricultural investment strategies and wine industry innovation. The consultation opportunities represented a natural extension of the expertise and experience that had been developed through comprehensive vineyard transformation. The advisory services required minimal additional resource commitment while generating substantial consulting revenue and expanding professional networks within agricultural investment and wine industry circles that could support future business development initiatives. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the vineyard broker who had originally introduced the Montrose acquisition opportunity, contacted me regarding potential collaboration on additional premium property acquisitions, where strategic modernization could create exceptional value for sophisticated investors who understood long-term agricultural asset development potential. Victoria, your success at Montrose has attracted attention from property owners throughout the Pacific Northwest, who recognize that traditional approaches to vineyard management may not be optimal for achieving market potential. She explained during our consultation meeting about expanding investment activities. There are exceptional properties available where your strategic approach could create similar transformation outcomes while generating strong returns for diversified agricultural portfolios. Her assessment reflected growing recognition within agricultural investment circles that professional management and strategic capital deployment could revolutionize traditional wine industry operations, while preserving essential craft elements that supported premium market positioning and brand differentiation strategies. The opportunity to expand investment activities beyond Montrose represented both natural evolution of successful strategies and validation of professional competence that had been demonstrated through comprehensive vineyard transformation and exceptional financial performance outcomes. Additional acquisitions would leverage expertise and relationships while diversifying agricultural investment portfolios across multiple premium properties. The expansion strategy focused on identifying undervalued vineyard properties where conservative management had limited potential while maintaining quality assets and favorable market positioning that could support strategic modernization and revenue enhancement initiatives similar to those successfully implemented at Montrose Vineyards. The second acquisition involved Cascade Ridge Vineyards, a 43-acre property in the Yamhill Valley that possessed exceptional terroir characteristics and established vine plantings, but had been constrained by outdated production facilities and limited marketing reach. The acquisition price of $1.9 million reflected distressed circumstances that created opportunity for investors with appropriate expertise and capital resources. The strategic analysis revealed that Cascade Ridge possessed advantages that complemented Montrose' capabilities while offering distinct market positioning opportunities. The terroir characteristics supported different varietal production that would appeal to market segments not fully served by Montrose offerings, while the property location provided logistical advantages for distribution to urban markets and tourist destinations. The modernization program at Cascade Ridge followed similar principles to those successfully implemented at Montrose, but incorporated lessons learned from the initial transformation experience. The capital investment of $380,000 focused on production efficiency improvements and environmental systems that would achieve carbon-neutral operations while enhancing quality consistency and production capacity. The implementation timeline was accelerated based on vendor relationships and operational expertise developed during the Montrose project. The efficiency gains reduced both project costs and disruption to ongoing operations, while achieving modernization outcomes that exceeded initial projections for both environmental impact and financial performance improvements. The success of multiple vineyard acquisitions and transformations established Harrison Investment Group as a recognized leader in agricultural asset development and sustainable wine industry innovation. The portfolio approach enabled economies of scale in operations, marketing, and distribution, while maintaining distinct brand identities and market positioning strategies for each property. The professional recognition extended beyond wine industry publications to broader agricultural investment and sustainable business communities that valued the integration of environmental responsibility with commercial success. The Harvard Business Review featured Montrose Vineyards as a case study in strategic asset transformation that demonstrated how professional management could unlock value while enhancing rather than compromising traditional craft practices. The academic attention reflected growing interest in business models that achieved financial success through environmental stewardship and community engagement, rather than exploiting natural resources or compromising long-term sustainability for short-term profit maximization. The recognition positioned agricultural investment strategies as examples of responsible capitalism that created value for multiple stakeholder groups. The expansion of professional recognition created speaking opportunities at agricultural investment conferences and sustainable business forums, where industry leaders sought insights about strategies for balancing commercial objectives with environmental responsibility and community engagement priorities. The presentations provided platforms for sharing expertise while establishing relationships with potential investors and collaboration partners. The conference presentations emphasized practical implementation strategies rather than theoretical discussions about sustainable agriculture principles. The focus on actionable approaches and documented outcomes appealed to audiences of business professionals who sought proven methods for achieving environmental objectives without compromising financial performance or operational efficiency. The speaking engagements generated consulting opportunities with agricultural investment firms and family offices that managed substantial capital allocations for sophisticated investors who recognized long-term value creation potential in professionally managed sustainable agriculture operations. The consulting relationships provided revenue diversification while expanding networks of potential investment partners for future agricultural acquisitions. The family dynamics surrounding professional success and industry recognition revealed interesting contrasts between relatives who had supported appropriate business relationships and those who had chosen confrontational approaches to ownership authority and operational management decisions. The positive outcomes achieved through strategic vineyard management provided validation for boundary-setting decisions, while demonstrating benefits that cooperative family members could share through continued appropriate engagement. Margaret Foster expressed pride in family association with recognized industry leadership and environmental stewardship that reflected values she had long advocated through her foundation work and professional activities. Her support for strategic approaches had been vindicated through outcomes that exceeded initial expectations, while maintaining principles that aligned with her personal and professional commitments. The recognition you have achieved through professional vineyard management reflects the kind of leadership our family should be proud to support. she said during a conversation about industry awards and media coverage that had highlighted Montrose' transformation outcomes. "Your approach demonstrates that business success and environmental responsibility represent complementary rather than competing objectives." Victoria Sterling similarly expressed satisfaction with outcomes that had enhanced family reputation while providing continued access to exceptional vineyard facilities and premium wine offerings that reflected her personal preferences for quality and environmental consciousness. Her early support for professional management approaches had been validated through results that exceeded expectations, while preserving values that mattered to her. "The transformation of Montrose under your leadership has created something truly exceptional that serves everyone's interests while maintaining the character and values that make this property special," she observed during a family gathering that showcased enhanced facilities and premium hospitality offerings. "The professional recognition is well-deserved and reflects the vision and competence you brought to vineyard ownership." The positive feedback from cooperative family members contrasted sharply with continued absence and apparent resentment from Stephanie, whose legal challenges had been conclusively resolved, but whose emotional investment in fantasy authority had prevented participation in remarkable outcomes that had elevated every aspect of vineyard operations and family gathering experiences. The industry recognition and professional success had fundamentally altered family dynamics by establishing undeniable evidence of competence and achievement that exceeded anything previously accomplished through traditional approaches to vineyard management or family relationship structures. The transformation demonstrated how individual capability and strategic vision could revolutionize circumstances while creating value for stakeholders who approached relationships with appropriate respect and cooperation. The broader implications of agricultural investment success extended beyond family dynamics to influence industry standards and practices throughout the Pacific Northwest wine community. Other vineyard owners began adopting modernization strategies and sustainable practices that had been pioneered at Montrose and Cascade Ridge, creating competitive pressures that elevated operational standards across regional wine production. The influence on industry practices reflected how successful innovation could create competitive advantages that eventually became standard approaches, as other operators recognized the market benefits of environmental responsibility and operational efficiency improvements. The leadership position achieved through strategic modernization had created sustainable competitive advantages while encouraging broader industry evolution toward more responsible practices. The recognition from environmental organizations added another dimension to professional validation by acknowledging agricultural operations that demonstrated practical solutions to sustainability challenges while maintaining commercial viability and operational excellence. The awards and certifications provided marketing advantages while confirming alignment between business strategies and environmental stewardship principles. The Oregon Environmental Council presented Montrose Vineyards with their Excellence in Sustainable Agriculture Award, recognizing the comprehensive approach to environmental protection that had been integrated with operational modernization and business development strategies. The recognition highlighted achievements in water conservation, carbon footprint reduction, and habitat preservation that had been accomplished without compromising production quality or financial performance. The environmental recognition complemented business awards and industry acknowledgement to establish comprehensive validation of strategic approaches that had transformed traditional agricultural operations while preserving essential character and craft traditions. The combination of commercial success and environmental leadership created positioning that appealed to premium market segments while establishing sustainable competitive advantages. The professional recognition and industry influence had created platforms for expanding impact beyond individual vineyard operations to address broader challenges facing agricultural communities and environmental conservation efforts throughout the Pacific Northwest region. The leadership position provided opportunities to influence policy discussions and resource allocation decisions that affected sustainable agriculture development and rural economic revitalization initiatives. The expansion of influence reflected how individual success could create opportunities for broader positive impact when strategic vision and professional competence were combined with appropriate platforms for sharing expertise and advocating for policies that supported sustainable economic development in agricultural communities that faced economic pressures and environmental challenges. The recognition achieved through professional vineyard management and strategic investment success had established foundations for continued expansion of agricultural investment activities, while providing validation of approaches that balanced commercial objectives with environmental responsibility and community engagement priorities. The success demonstrated how competence and vision could transform circumstances while creating value that extended far beyond individual financial returns to encompass industry leadership and positive social impact. The invitation to participate in the National Agricultural Innovation Summit arrived during the third year of vineyard operations, representing recognition that extended far beyond regional wine industry accomplishments to national acknowledgement of leadership in sustainable agricultural business practices. The summit brought together agricultural innovators, policymakers, and investment professionals to address challenges facing American agriculture in an era of climate change and evolving consumer preferences. The invitation specifically requested presentation of case studies demonstrating how strategic investment and professional management could transform traditional agricultural operations while maintaining environmental stewardship and community engagement priorities. The recognition reflected growing national interest in business models that achieved commercial success through sustainable practices, rather than environmental exploitation or resource depletion strategies. The presentation preparation required comprehensive documentation of transformation outcomes achieved at Montrose Vineyards and Cascade Ridge, including detailed analysis of operational improvements, environmental impact reductions, and financial performance metrics that demonstrated viability of sustainable agricultural investment approaches. The data compilation revealed the remarkable scope of positive change that had been accomplished through systematic strategic implementation. The environmental impact analysis documented water usage reductions of 43%, carbon footprint elimination through renewable energy integration, and habitat preservation initiatives that had enhanced biodiversity while maintaining productive agricultural operations. The environmental improvements had been achieved without compromising production quality or operational efficiency, demonstrating practical solutions to sustainability challenges that faced agricultural communities throughout the nation. The financial performance documentation revealed investment returns that significantly exceeded traditional agricultural benchmarks, while generating stable cash flows and asset appreciation that supported continued expansion and modernization initiatives. The economic success validated sustainable practices as sound business strategy rather than idealistic compromise that required sacrifice of commercial objectives for environmental principles. The presentation at the National Agricultural Innovation Summit generated substantial interest from agricultural investment firms, family offices, and institutional investors who recognized potential for scaling successful strategies across broader portfolios of agricultural assets. The attention reflected growing recognition that environmental sustainability represented competitive advantage rather than operational constraint in agricultural markets that increasingly valued responsible production practices. The summit presentation led to collaboration opportunities with Meridian Capital Partners, a specialized agricultural investment firm that managed institutional capital for pension funds and endowments seeking exposure to sustainable agriculture assets. The partnership discussions focused on developing comprehensive strategies for acquiring and transforming underperforming agricultural properties throughout the Pacific Northwest and California wine regions. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.